used to be a lot of dance halls in Chicago. In fact, I went to Loyola undergrad, and there's one of the main buildings in Loyola downtown is Lewis Towers. My mom tells me there used to be a dance hall in Lewis Towers. So my mom and dad met, and I grew up on the south side, and then we moved to the south suburbs when I was about in 4th grade, and lived in Chicago my whole life. I went to undergrad at Loyola. I majored in math and computer science, and I actually worked as a systems programmer for a few years. And when I was doing that, I realized that the part of my job that I liked the most was the helping people part. I enjoyed helping people, but I was only helping them with computer issues. And I thought, well, I think I could help people in other ways too. And so I was thinking, what should I do? And I thought about going to law school. So I ended up going to law school, and I graduated from University of Chicago Law School.
In a nutshell.
Yeah, that's
I bet a lot of you here used to go to some of those dance halls that she was talking about, that for parents, and I know quite a few of you met each other at dances. It was a very popular way to meet in those days. Not so much anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think.
My mom was a good dancer, my dad not so much.
Not really a good dancer. Well, she married him anyway.
Yes.
So. What high school did you go to?
I went to TF North High School in Calumet City, which used to be a city of sin. It used to have so many bars, and then later I think it became famous because it was the home of the Blues Brothers.
Oh yeah, right. Anybody from Calumet City or know that high school? No, okay. No. We all know the Blues Brothers. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna jump around a little bit, but one of your, I guess, things that you like to talk about is that your Native American heritage. So, did you always know that you were Native American, or was this something that you learned about later in life, and how did you incorporate that into your community and life?
Yeah, I didn't, obviously, I grew up in Chicago. I didn't grow up in a Native community. I did not grow up on a reservation. So I really kind of learned more about it when I was older. Actually, honestly, when I started getting more interested in learning about my history was after my dad passed away, because I get my Native American heritage from my grandmother, Ora Mae Pallone. She grew up in Westville, Oklahoma, and Westville, Oklahoma is a little town on the Oklahoma-Arkansas border, and I had never visited there, and I went there because later I was head of this health service that provides health care to Native Americans. When I went there, I realized, because there's a marker there, that Westville, Oklahoma was actually the end of one of the Trail of Tears. And so I think my great-great-grandfather probably was in the Trail of Tears. And so, funny story how my grandmother met my grandfather. My grandmother, she grew up in a family of 16 kids, and only 10 of them lived above the age of 3 because of lack of health care. So, but one of her brothers was in World War I, and while he was in Europe, my grandfather was serving with him. And I guess no one was writing to my grandfather, and so my grandmother's brother said, "My sister will write to you." And so she started writing to my grandfather. So when they both got discharged in World War I, my grandfather was from Southern Illinois. He didn't go right there. He went straight to Oklahoma, met my grandmother, and took her to Southern Illinois, and they got married right away. So, so when I was little, my grandmother used to talk about that she got land. And I really didn't know what that meant, but if you all recall, under the Dawes Act, Native Americans got land, but the catch was, you didn't get it, just own it by yourself. you owned it jointly with your relatives. So she owned it with like some of her siblings and her dad. And she always said, my dad made me sell my land. And, you know, I think for a woman at that time, even though she was married and an adult, when her dad told her, you have to sell your land, she thought she had to do it, so she did it. So fast forward, I was graduated from law school and my dad had passed away. He actually passed away before his mother. And I really wanted to learn more about my Native American heritage. So I filled out the paperwork. I became an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation. And you have to trace back to someone who was on the Dawes rolls. And my grandmother was on the Dawes rolls. They used to make Native Americans be on these rolls of people. And I then later, I guess we'll get to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Can you just, I'm not familiar with the Dawes Rolls or the Trail of Tears. What is that?
The Trail of Tears is around the 1830s. The United States government had a policy of pushing Native Americans westward. So lots of tribes, not just the Cherokees. The Cherokees originally were in Georgia, and they got pushed to march in hot weather, cold weather. So many people died, babies died, and they marched the Cherokees to Oklahoma. And still the headquarters of the Cherokee Nation is in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. But some of the Cherokees, they hid in the hills. And so now there's an Eastern Band Cherokee. They're in North Carolina. I think they were originally part of one tribe, but because of what the U.S. government did. So that's the Trail of Tears. And other tribes other than the Cherokees had to march as well, westward toward reservations. And the Dawes Rolls was an act around the 1870s by Senator Dawes that I guess it's different because most Native Americans, indigenous people, they don't have the same vision of property rights that come from our tradition in England. Everybody owned the land. And so under the Dawes Rolls, they wanted to, mainstream Native Americans and diminish their culture and have them own parcels of land. So if you were on the Dawes Rolls, you got some land, and so that's how my grandmother got land.
So you just said a minute ago that you like speaking to people, and the thing that you were missing most, or the thing that you enjoyed the most, was helping people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny to me that you became an attorney and not working through advocacy and social service. So what made you decide to become an attorney and not go to the social service route?
I guess because when I was in college, I don't know about all of you, I liked all the subjects equally. I ended up majoring in math and computer science, but I liked English, I liked history, I liked writing, and I thought that I could do those things as an attorney. And then I guess part of the other thing is, I know many of you probably watched Perry Mason. When I was growing up, it was LA Law. I saw so many LA laws. I'm like, I want to be a trial attorney. I want to be in court. I want to do trials.
So through your career of advocacy, what's the thing that you're the most proud of?
Well, I did become an attorney, and I did get to do my trials. I started, I actually clerked for a judge in Macon, Georgia, so I have to say, and many of you probably relate to this, I'm from Chicago. I did not spend much time in the South, and here I am living in Macon, Georgia, so it was quite a different experience. But then I worked at a law firm in Chicago, but I wasn't getting to do the trials that I wanted. So I applied to the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington. So I moved to Washington, and the kind of trials I did were government contracts. And so one of my big cases was with the U.S. Navy. they have these kind of ships, they're called minesweepers. They were used in the Persian Gulf War, and the really unique thing about these ships is that they're not made of metal. They can't be made of metal because they're sweeping mines. They're made of wood. And these ships were built, there were two ship companies, both on the sides of Lake Superior, one on one side and one on the other, building these minesweepers. And one of the shipbuilders wanted, this is the theme of all contract cases, more money from the US government. So I got to do trials. But after being there for a couple years, I just became fascinated with, I think, politics and public service. And I wanted to work on a presidential campaign. So I ended up writing a letter saying that I would quit my job and volunteer for free on a presidential campaign. And so I ended up doing that, and then kind of miraculously, I got a job doing policy in the White House, so.
We're gonna get there, we're gonna hold questions till the end, but we're gonna get there. Let's just back up for a second, because you said that you clerked at a firm in Georgia, and I heard for a judge, and I heard a story about how you, the firm that you were working for stopped David Duke running for president.
Oh, yeah.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was clerking for the judge in Georgia in 1992, 1991, and that was a presidential year. And we used to get cases, sometimes they were normal cases, but sometimes they were like emergency cases. And so there was a case that came to us that David Duke, and some of you may know him, he's like a white nationalist from the South, who wanted to run on the Georgia ballot as a Republican. But the Republican Party at that time said, David Duke is not part of our party. He cannot run as a Republican in Georgia. So we had to quickly go up to Atlanta, hear oral arguments, and the court said that the Republican Party has a First Amendment right to define who their members are. And if they say that David Duke is not a member of the Republican Party, then he's not a member and he cannot run on the Republican ballot in Georgia.
And that was that.
Yeah.
It ended.
Well, that David Duke didn't run. Bill Clinton won that election. Yeah.
She won.
Well, I worked for the judge, so we were issuing the ruling. Yeah. Yeah.
Were you ever afraid of backlash from the white nationalists or anybody associated with them for the work that you were doing?
I didn't. I mean, a lot of judges now, and I mean, I'm a lawyer and I was president of the bar, judges are getting so many threats and attacks lately. And actually, I clerked in the 11th Circuit, and a year before I clerked, one of the judges did get a mail bomb and he was killed, Judge Vance. And if I don't know if any of you guys watch MSNBC, but Joyce Vance is a commentator on her. That's her dad. Yeah, yeah. But that was a year before I clerked. So when I was there, I didn't personally feel afraid, but the judge, after Judge Vance was killed, the judge, and even to this day, the judge does not get mail at his home. It goes to the courthouse and they screen it, and he gets even his personal mail at home through the courthouse.
Even to this day?
Yeah, even
How many years ago was that? That was probably...
We don't want to say how many years ago that was.
Right,
It was a long time ago.
I do remember Bill Clinton running for president.
Yeah.
So, it was a while ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was 1992.
I won't say how old I was, or what grade I was in.
You're very young.
All right, so we're going to jump now to your political career. The first administration that you worked with was under the Clintons, the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton. Can you tell us how you got involved and what that was like?
Yeah, like I said, I sent a letter, and at that time, I didn't know anyone, I didn't know anything about it, and it's just a miracle that the volunteer coordinator at the campaign even opened my letter.
So you didn't have any political connections or aspirations, and you were working as what kind of an attorney were you working for?
I was working
prior?
as a trial attorney at the U.S. Department of Justice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
totally different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one day, well, actually, I was sending letters saying
But
that
what
I.
made you? I'm sorry to interrupt you. What made you want to even think to do that?
I don't know, I just became fascinated with it, and I thought that, I guess what I thought was that it was a way to help people even in broader ways than being an attorney.
Okay.
So initially I was sending letters saying that I would volunteer at night, and then I was working till midnight every night doing all these trials, and so finally I just said, you know what? I'll send a letter that I will volunteer full time. And so this woman called me and she made me come over to the campaign, which was right in DC where I lived. And she, I think in retrospect, she just wanted to look me in the eye to see if I was serious. And so she said, you're gonna quit your job to volunteer as on this campaign for free. And I said, yes, I will. She said, all right, come on over.
You weren't thinking like, how am I going to pay my bills?
No, I did. I planned that
Okay.
I could live for like, because I was still paying student loans. I was broke basically. I figured that I could live for about 8 or 9 months. And so I figured at the end of the campaign, even if I didn't get a job, I would be able to find some other kind of job. That's what I thought.
Okay. So you were thinking you were going to do this for what, like 9 months or?
Yeah, I mean, I thought worst case scenario, I'll do it for 9 months, but I think I had a hope that I would get a job.
Okay, got it, okay. There's 2 initiatives, I guess, that you helped push through. One was the defibrillators, which I'd love for you to talk about because that affects everybody in this room here. So can you talk about?
Yeah, so I ended up in the White House, as I said, just like a miracle. And I was working in the Domestic Policy Council. In the White House, there's several councils. There's a National Economic Council, and they work on economic policies. There's a National Security Council that works on national security, and then there's a Domestic Policy Council, and I was part of that. So certain people on the Domestic Policy Council, they worked on education policy, or health policy, or crime policy. But this guy and I, we were supposed to think up new ideas. So we could do almost anything. So one of the first things we wanted to work on was the American Heart Association came to us and said, you know, there's these new devices, they were new at the time, defibrillators, and it would be great to put them in public buildings and in airplanes and airports. And so when you're part of the federal government, you have to talk to a lot of people. So we would meet with people from the Department of Health and Human Services and doctors. And I remember vividly a few of the doctors, particularly one doctor, he thought that would be the most terrible idea. And why? Because he didn't want non-doctors using that machine. And the Heart Association was telling us, these machines, you can't screw it up. Like, you push a button, and the thing about it is, if your heart goes in fibrillation, you have about 10 minutes. So you need to act right away. So it took a couple years of talking to people to get people to kind of agree to do this. And so then, as it turned out, this won't surprise you because things are going on like this now in Washington, even worse than when I was there. A bill passed, and when a bill passes both the House of Representatives and the Senate, it goes into this reconciliation committee if parts of the law have to be reconciled. It was sitting there. One of the people who were staff people on Capitol Hill called me and said, Mary, even though this thing passed both the House and the Senate, it's not going to become law because it's just sitting over here, no one's gonna push it. She said, you have to tell me that the White House wants it. And I said, yeah, the White House wants that. So fast forward, it got signed, and so now defibrillators are in public buildings, and they're in airports and airplanes.
It's like a fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
You know, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And then, could you talk a little bit about the Native American education system that you pushed through? I think that was under the same presidency, right?
Yeah, so like I said, after I graduated law school and after my dad passed away, I wanted to learn more about my Native heritage. So when I got in the Domestic Policy Council, no one was doing Native American policy, and I said, I'll do it. And so I was learning each year, and I was in the White House for 4 years, and I learned more and more each year. And one of the things that, you know, I learned is that the U.S. government runs 3 healthcare systems. Do you know what they are? One is Department of Defense, one is Department of Veterans Affairs, and then they run a healthcare system for Native Americans. There's a law and treaties with tribes. And also they run an education system. They're running schools for Native Americans. And one of the things I wanted to do was increase the number of Native American teachers. So I said to these guys at the Department of Education, I said, you guys know the details, but I want to increase the number of Native American teachers, and there's also a series of like community colleges for Native Americans. They're called tribal colleges. There's about 36 of them around the country. I said, they're 2-year schools. I want to partner with tribal colleges and then have people from tribal colleges go to a 4-year school. So I said, these are the high level, you figure out the details. So after a couple weeks, they came back to me and they said, okay, Mary, we figured it out. And for like, you know, a few $1 million, we can train. And they said something like, I'm gonna extrapolate a little bit, but they said we could train like 663 Native American teachers. And I said, you know what? We're not gonna do that. Because the President of the United States is not gonna announce 663 teachers. We're gonna do 1,000. And they're like, what? And their eyes opened up. And so we did do that. And fast forward, just a couple years ago, I was down in Champaign-Urbana, where University of Illinois is, and I was meeting with these graduate students, and there were some Native American graduate students. And for some reason, I mentioned the Native American teachers. Mind you, this is like 25 years ago. And I looked over, and a couple of them were crying. And I said, what's going on? And they said, we were in that program, we became teachers, and now they have their PhDs in education.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really incredible. How did that make you feel in that moment? Because you...
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, just grateful.
That is just the antithesis of why you do what you do and why people in public service. That gets me on this guy. That's really, like, that's amazing. It's like it came full circle. You were able to see the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, because you sit in Washington and you're kind of in a bubble.
Yeah,
and
you're
you
in an
don't
office,
see the people.
and you're doing the work, and you're filling out paperwork and writing
Yeah.
grants, proposals, and all these things, and you really don't. I mean, you get numbers, you get data, but you don't see it because you're not in
You're
the
not
weeds.
meeting the people.
Yeah. Wow. So, you know, living in an urban area, we're very lucky that we have access to medical care and our choice of hospitals and doctors. And a lot of Native Americans who live in more rural areas, they don't have access to that. And that was something else that you were, right? I think that you started the Indian Health Service?
No, I didn't start it.
Oh, okay.
No, the Indian Health Service, since the time of treaties, many tribes entered into treaties with the United States. And if you look at these treaties, they say the United States is going to provide a doctor. And later, there's laws passed where the United States has a trust responsibility to provide health care for Native Americans. And so for many years, there was a health system, and then it was part of the Department of the Interior. And then in 1955, it moved over to Health, Education, and Welfare, which is now Health and Human Services. And so there's an Indian Health Service, and currently it's a $9 billion agency. It provides health care to 2.7 million Native Americans around the country. And something you may not realize, there's about 75 Native Americans in Chicago, in the Chicago area, and there's actually an Indian Health Service urban Indian clinic on the north side of Chicago. You might not have known that. And it's a system of 25 hospitals. A lot of them are on reservations, but there's also an urban Indian, because one of the things people don't realize is that over 70%, everybody thinks Native Americans live on reservations, which some of them do, but over 70% of Native Americans live in urban areas. So, and Chicago's one of the largest populations east of the Mississippi. And so I, fast forward many years, I was back in Illinois. I had worked for the governor here, and I was sitting at home, and I get a call, and a woman that I had worked with in the White House was now this was during the Obama administration, was Secretary of Health and Human Services. And they were looking for someone to run the Indian Health Service. So someone in her office called me and said something about would I like to do that. And I was shocked, because I am not a doctor. And I just blurted out, I said, you know I'm a lawyer, not a doctor, right? And they said, yes, we know that, but we want someone who's a strong manager. So I had to think very hard about whether I should take that job, because remember, you know, my grandmother lost a lot of her siblings for lack of health care, and I think a lot of the reason I took the job is I thought that I knew Washington, I thought I could do a good job, but I also wanted to honor my grandmother. So I ended up taking that job and doing it for a little over a year.
Did you have a story that you went to Alaska and you visited these remote clinics?
Yeah, so I mean, part of the 2 million Native Americans and Alaska Natives that the Indian Health Service serves, they serve Alaska Natives in Alaska. And I guess I'll ask another quiz question. Do you know how many, there's federally recognized tribes that the federal government recognizes, there's state recognized tribes, and then there's some tribes who've lost their sovereignty and their status, because tribes are sovereign nations. Do you know how many federally recognized tribes there are in the United States? Any guesses?
I have no idea.
Your son looks like he knows.
I'm gonna go with random number out here, 2,000.
Oh, okay, that's high. No, it's like 578.
I don't even have a frame of reference.
578 federally recognized tribes. And out of the 578, over 100 are in California, and over 200 are in Alaska. But a lot of the Alaska tribes, they're very small, they're little villages. And so the Indian Health Service provides funding for the tribes in Alaska. So when I was head of the Indian Health Service, I went up to Alaska to visit some of these villages. And so there's a big Alaska Native hospital in Anchorage. There's some regional hospitals, but I took a little prop plane and we went out to some of these villages like Chivak. And when you go there, their health system, you know, I guess if you want to guess what it is, it's basically a trailer with like either a nurse or a physician assistant. That's what they have. So if someone really needs sophisticated medical attention, they have to get flown out, and depending how serious their condition is, they get flown to the regional hospital, the hospital in Anchorage, or if it's very, very serious, even to Seattle. So I flew out and saw these little villages where actually in these villages, there are no cars. Like maybe there's 1 or 2 pickup trucks, but other than that, people walk or they ride on like riding lawnmowers.
I was gonna say snowmobiles.
Yeah, and you know, if the weather, you know, we flew there, if the weather gets even changed a little bit, guess what? You are staying overnight. You will not be able to fly out because these planes seat about like 10 people, that's it.
It's really hard for me to wrap my head around because I grew up in this, you know, this area. Women's health, so, you know, just simple things that we take for granted, like mammograms or, you know, colonoscopies. These are routine tests and, you know, that we have access to, and these people don't have access to those things.
Yeah, or else they have to travel
They have to
thousands
travel.
of miles.
Right, they probably, I don't know if they can afford it or even have health insurance that can even cover it.
Well, they have health care through the Indian Health Service, but whether they have access to the procedures and the specialists, that's the question.
Do they have healers in these communities?
Yeah, and part of what they do is, you know, a lot, like for mental health, or there's actually a lot of suicides, particularly in Alaska too. And so for some of the suicide prevention programs, they integrate indigenous culture so that it's different than like a suicide program you would find in Chicago.
I just hearing you talk about, you know, our, you know, the Jewish religion and culture, we have so many similarities because we have clinics in this neighborhood that are special for the Jewish community, and they're familiar with Jewish diseases, and it's geared towards the community, and that sense of community and is, I don't know, it's you know, it's so important, and it's not a small thing. You know, you want to have community leaders and advocates who know the culture and the community so that we can, you know, cater towards their specific needs. I'm just curious, going back to your domestic policy council job, how did you get involved in that particular? Because you said there were a lot of different councils, I guess, that you could have been a part of.
I'll go back and tell a funny story. So remember, I wrote that letter that I would volunteer for free on the campaign. So I get there and I am volunteering for zero money. And I'm sitting in a room, like if people needed copies, I would go to the Xerox machine and make copies. But the woman who allowed me to come to the campaign, I don't know why, but she really looked out for me. And so she said, you know, Mary, you're a lawyer, there's these guys, they're lawyers on this campaign, you should work with them. So I would trudge down to their office and say, hey, do you need any help? And there were 3 of them, and the guy who was the office manager, his name's Mark, but this guy, Tom, had to make the decision if I could help them. And Tom was always traveling with the president, so Mark would say, Tom's not here, so I go back to my volunteer room, and I did this several times. Finally, one day I go there, Tom is there. And I said, do you need help? And he goes, yeah, we could use some help.
Did he know you or your back?
No. And so I just started helping him, and they were supposed to think up new ideas for the president, and we could look at anything we wanted to, just if it would be a good idea for the president to do. And so one day, a big Supreme Court case down on campaign finance, so I wrote a memo, no one told me to do it, and the guy we worked for, Dick Morris, was meeting with the president every Wednesday at the White House. And so Dick comes in that Wednesday and he said, has anyone looked at that case? And Tom said, yeah, Mary wrote a memo. He goes, yeah, give that to me. So he took it with him and showed it to the president, and I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I don't have typos in there. But anyway, Tom got a job in the White House, and he asked me to go with him.
Okay.
So that's how it
happened.
yeah.
Okay. So I want to go back to your family for a minute. So I've heard you speak about how your mom was your best friend, and family and heritage is important to you. And you have a foundation named after your grandmother and your mother called the Caroline and Ora Smith Foundation. Is that correct? So this foundation is a camp that teaches STEM to young Girls or women?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, girls.
teenagers? Girls,
Yeah.
okay. So can you talk a little bit about your foundation and what STEM is for those in the room that don't know what STEM is and why this is so important for young girls?
Yeah, well, so after I learned about Native American stuff, I really wanted to keep helping the community. And so when I left the Indian Health Service, I thought, what can I continue doing? And I moved back to Chicago. I was living with my mother, and I wanted to honor my mother and grandmother, and so I thought, I'll start this foundation. And since I have a technology background with my computer science, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And so I started a foundation, the Carolina Nora Smith Foundation, to train Native American girls in STEM. And so it's been in existence for about 8 years now. And one of the things we do is we host, like I said, there's a lot of Native Americans in Chicago, you might not realize. We host a STEM summer camp for Native kids in Chicago, and actually the camp is next week. And it's usually a week long in the summer, and they go on field trips. They go to like the Field Museum, the Museum of Science and Industry. Last year we went to a forest preserve, and there's actually indigenous guides that teach them about native plants and things like that too.
So with this camp for girls, you're also an advocate for women's rights. Can you talk a little bit about what you've done for women's rights and how you feel about women's rights?
Well, yeah, I always advocate for women. And when I was in the White House, one of the other areas I worked on was women's policy. And one of the things we wanted to do was get equal pay for women, because I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you probably, some of you do, women still don't make the same that men make. And I think it's like around 80 cents on the dollar. But think back, I was in the White House 30 years ago, and it was, I think, 64 cents on the dollar, so it's only gone up like 15 cents in 30 years. And one of the things I worked on was equal pay for women. And in 1963, President Kennedy signed the Equal Pay Act, and there's a famous photo of all the women who worked on it behind him when he's signing it on the desk. And one of the women who was a very lead on that is Dr. Dorothy Height. And Dorothy Height, she always wore a hat. And when I was in the White House, she was probably in her 90s, but the thing about Dorothy is she was such a fighter, and the thing I try to take in my life is she always showed up. And so if she got invited to the White House, even when she was in her 90s, she showed up with her hat. So I got to meet Dorothy Height, and she's in the famous photo, and I used to keep that photo on my desk to inspire me every day. So I worked on a lot of issues like that, and then later, I'm very involved in the American Bar Association. I was on the ABA's Commission on Women in the Profession, trying to promote women in the legal profession, and I worked on some reports, and just have tried to advocate for women my life. And then one of the things that actually I know some of you know, the Equal Rights Amendment has been trying to be passed since the 1970s, and a couple years ago there was actually a little energy around it. It still didn't pass, but that year the ABA had never taken a position on it, and while I was president, it became ABA policy to push for the Equal Rights Amendment. I was able to speak on behalf of that when I was ABA president.
I think a lot of the women in this room can really resonate with what you're saying, because they have told me that in their younger working years, they were like 3 professions. So it's not even just the pay. They, all this math and science. And there was a woman who used to live here, and she was a lawyer, and I was shocked because I think she was the only woman in law school at the time. But I think they were like, you could be a teacher, you could be a secretary, and I think a nurse.
Yeah.
Is that right? There were 3 professions? Yes, that seems enough, yeah. So, we've come a long way, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
We still have ways to come, right? We still haven't had a female president. we still haven't had a female Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And I know Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she used to say, you know, because when she was there, there were three of the 9 justices were women, and she'd say, well, how many is going to be enough? And there's a total of 9 justices, and she'd say, when there's 9, because there was 9 men for over 100 years, and no one said anything.
Right. Somebody just recently said to me that if a man, this isn't against men, this is just like, but if a man was able to give birth, there would be a year-long maternity leave.
Maybe 2.
Maternity leave. So we're almost running out of time, and we did not talk at all about how you became president of the American Bar Association, and I don't want to skip that over because it's really interesting. So maybe we can just touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so well, we were just talking about how women have come a long way, but we still got a ways to go. And so the American Bar Association was started in 1878, so it's like almost 150 years old. And in that time, there's been, I think, only 13 women have been presidents, and most of them in recent years. So when I was running for president, there had been, I guess, 10, but most of them, when they ran unopposed, except for the first one. She had to claw her way. But I ended up running against a tall Southern white male. And so when I was running, and this is just a few years ago, people would say to my face, you know, Mary, you don't look like an ABA president.
Does that mean that you're not a man? Is that what they meant?
Yeah, like they said that the guy running against me, he looks like out of central casting, but I don't look like an ABA president. And so now I speak to a lot of students, and I tell them, you know what? I look exactly like what an ABA president should look like, and so do all of you. And well, everybody, the supporters of my opponent, they thought they would have a cakewalk. They thought that I would not be much competition for him. So he was like coasting along, and you have to get votes just like a real campaign. And I remember I had worked on campaigns. So I'm like, I know how to do this. So I was slowly getting votes until they woke up and they realized, oh my gosh, Mary's actually making this a competitive race. And they tried to say, you know, what have I done in my life? I haven't really accomplished anything. I couldn't run the ABA. I don't know about finances. And then my favorite was, Mary, you can't be ABA president because the ABA president has to dominate the room, and you don't dominate the rooms. And the thing about it is, there's different types of leadership, and there's different types of leadership that's needed in different times. And dominating the room is, I mean, we see a lot of that type of leadership right now. It's not always effective. But needless to say, as it turned out, I had been working hard. My opponent, I think they woke up kind of late because they didn't think I was going to be a threat to them. And so I won that race, and the thing about it was, it wasn't even close. So.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you know how many votes you got?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's the key thing here too. Only 69 people vote. So, and it's a like year and a half long process, and so you got to keep calling people who haven't committed to you. But the end votes were 40-29.
Yep. Good. Okay. So much of your life and career seemed to be circumstantial. I noticed that. Have you?
Yeah, I think
that
it's
being running through
circumstantial,
your-
but it's probably the same for all of you. I feel like, yeah, some of it certainly was luck and just good fortune, but some of it is, I think, just putting yourself in a position so that opportunities are there for you, and then being able to look and say, yes, I want to seize that opportunity.
Inspiring. Yeah. I just want to quote you quoting Ellie Wiesel, because he's one of my favorites also.
Oh, yes.
As long as you have a why, you will figure out how.
Yeah.
I think that's powerful. So, that was all the things that I prepared. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us today? Did we hit everything?
Yeah, I
All the
think
key
so.
points?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I would like to open up for questions. Yes, Carol. I just want to repeat the question. So she's asking why the Indian schools had specific schools and why it wasn't, they weren't integrated into all public schools.
Yeah, I think a lot of reasons. There's probably not one reason. One is that, remember I told you that the U.S. government forced all the Native Americans, a lot of them westward, and they pushed them onto reservations, and so they're living in very remote locations, and they're not even close to where other people are. And then the other thing that I didn't mention at all, but one of the other policies of the U.S. government until recently was to assimilate Native Americans. They wanted to extinguish Native American culture. No, yes, that's what they wanted to do. Yes, it's terrible. And in fact, they had a policy to pull Native American kids away from their parents and put them with white families. And from like the 1800s till even the 1960s, hundreds of thousands of Native American kids were taken from their families and put in boarding schools where they were abused. And there's so many there's hundreds of boarding schools, not too many are still open, but the same thing happened in Canada, and the thing about it too is, on most of these boarding schools, there's cemeteries on the property. And now why would there have to be a cemetery? Because so many kids die from the abuse. So yeah, and I know a lot of people who were in boarding schools, and Deb Haaland, in the Biden administration, she was the first Native American cabinet secretary. She actually had a boarding school initiative, and she went around the country and talked to people who were in boarding schools or their ancestors were in boarding schools, and it was so emotional. People were crying, it was so devastating.
What point in history was that?
It's from the mid-1800s to the 1960s. Yeah.
Yeah, can I say something?
Yes.
We just watched the movie with Abraham Lincoln.
Oh,
what
yeah.
he did for their country. And I'm thinking, how come they didn't find someone not like him that would fight for the other people that were human beings like us?
I just want to repeat the question. So she was asking why there hasn't been anybody in history to fight for Native Americans. That's your question?
Yes.
Well, I mean, you all know, sayings like, first they came for these people, then they come for the next people. Well, Native Americans were one of the last people that no one was speaking up for. In fact, even though Native Americans are born on this land, they served in the military. Women got the right to vote in 1924. Native Americans did not get the right to vote, even though a law passed around that time in every state until the 1950s. Yeah, yeah. Yes, tribal leaders met, they went to Washington, they had treaties, but guess what? The United States broke its promises and broke those treaties, and they're still breaking those treaties. Yeah, I mean, it's better, but, there's still, just to let you know, on some reservations, the average life expectancy in the United States is probably in the 80s. On some parts of South Dakota, the life expectancy is in the 60s. That's the same for undeveloped countries. So it's still, because they're living on reservations far away.
They don't have access to the healthcare
Yeah.
like we talked about.
Yeah. I know.
Anybody else have a question? No? I mean, I could talk to you all day. But, well, thank you so much. I think we all, oh yeah, Manako? Yeah, go ahead.
When you were working in the White House, was there anything, you said you were coming up with ideas and whatnot, was there anything that you look back on now that you're not there and you don't have that opportunity anymore that you kind of wish you were able to pass? Or maybe ideas?
Everything.
That's such a good question.
Like example, some things still haven't passed. So Native Americans, like I said, they're sovereign nations. They're similar to a state or a country. And so the United States government has a government-to-government relationship. And so the Native Americans in the 48 contiguous states are sovereign. And then in 1971, the Alaska Natives got sovereignty. Well, the Native Hawaiians still do not have sovereignty. And the last sovereign of the Native Hawaiians was Queen Liliuokalani in the 1890s, and she had to write to President McKinley, help me out. And so one of the things I worked on was trying to get sovereignty for Native Hawaiians. It still hasn't happened. And then, I guess one thing that you guys would resonate with, one of the areas I worked on was hate crimes legislation. And there is a federal hate crime law, but we wanted to add women, LGBTQ people, and people with disabilities. And everybody had reasons for, different reasons why. I think prejudice against LGBTQ people. For the women, they said, oh, that'll make every rape a hate crime. And so,
well, what's wrong with that?
Yeah. And so I worked on that for 4 years, and then after Clinton was out of office, George W. Bush was in office, and that hate crimes law did not pass till Barack Obama was president. And I think it was after, I don't know if you remember, but Matthew Shepard, this gay boy, got killed in Wyoming and got a lot of press, and it was only 7-8 years later that the law passed. And the equal pay for women. I work on equal pay legislation, and it wasn't until the Lilly Ledbetter Act passed in Barack Obama's term. So that was another 10 years to get that passed. Yeah, takes a long time for things that seem, why wouldn't you do this?
It's human rights.
Yeah.
Okay, last call. Yes.
Do you know if the Canadians have the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. They actually do. They had boarding schools up in Canada, and they separated the kids from their parents, but they called it differently. They called it the scoop generation. They scooped them away. And so, I've been involved in that American Bar Association for a while. So a few years back, I was the first Native American woman to be president of the American Bar. And 2 years before I was president, the Canadian Bar Association had their first Indigenous person as president. In Canada, they call it First Nations. And we had a resolution to speak in front of our Congress. And he was part of the scoop generation, and he's not even that old, he's about my age. And he spoke powerfully in favor of that resolution. Yeah.
We have a cousin who lives in Toronto. He's very active with the problems of Indigenous people. I wonder if you know her name is,
No, I know a lot of the people, but.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's really great. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't hear what she said.
She said there was a Netflix show recently that showed about the boarding schools and taking the kids. In fact, there's a law to counteract that now. It's called the Indian Child Welfare Act. So if there's a Native American child, like in foster care or adoption, a Native American family gets priority to adopt them.
It isn't that long ago that we saw all the news about the cemeteries around the school.
Yes.
With the Native
Yeah.
American children.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, you know, the other thing too is I'm also on the board of the Field Museum, and all these museums, they have human remains, they have funerary objects, and so there's a law, NAGPRA, that repatriates those objects. So all these museums, the Smithsonian, the Field Museum, all of them are trying to repatriate objects back to Native American tribes.
Down in Cahokia, they had been removing it back all the bodies, and they had them on display,
Mhm.
and that's not that long ago.
Right, well, and the Smithsonian still has a lot of them. Still has a lot.
So there is a Jewish law that prohibits exhuming and displaying human remains. I think that, you know, these mummies and, you know, any human remains that are on display are, it's a thing, yeah, it's disrespect, it's not appropriate, it's disrespectful. These people were real, they had families. Yeah, yeah.
In fact, I was just recently up in Washington State, and they have a big museum there. A good deal of it was about the Native Americans and about how they have been treated and how they're saying they're human beings too. So it's very late, but coming to the forefront.
Yeah, yeah, and I will just say there's about close to 1,000 federal judges in the country, and up until about 10 years ago, in the history of the country, only 2 Native Americans had been federal judges, and at some point there was 0, but now, right now, there's 7 out of like almost 1,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't even talk about the opioid addiction, and yeah, I had that on my heart. That's something that I
And alcoholism.
alcoholism,